Blind date disaster, the poor mechanic walked in, the paralyzed female CEO never expected to smile again. Wait, you're in a wheelchair. This is a joke, right? The man's voice cut across the restaurant, loud and sharp. Forks paused. Conversations halted. Heads turned toward the corner booth, where a woman with long golden hair sat in a sleek, custom wheelchair. Isabel Hartley didn't flinch, but her hand tightened around the table's edge. Her face stayed composed, but inside, something twisted. She had known this was a risk. Still, it stung. "I mean, come on," the man said, standing now. "You're the girl from the app? You didn't say you were—" He motioned to the chair. "Broken?" Gasps rippled. A waiter nearby froze. A couple whispered behind their menus. Isabel straightened her back. Her voice was low, calm. "I didn't think I had to explain that. I'm here for a conversation. If you came for a fantasy, I'm not it." He let out a cruel laugh. "You're right. You're not." Then, louder for the whole room, "I thought I matched with Isabel Hartley, the CEO, the billionaire biotech genius, not some sympathy case." There it was. He knew who she was. And now so did everyone else. Whispers followed. A phone camera lifted. Someone mouthed, "Is that really her?" Isabel sat motionless. Her blazer was tailored, her hair perfectly pinned. She looked every bit the powerful executive. Except now she felt like a girl again, wounded, on display. "Blind date disaster?" someone muttered nearby. Her fingers gripped the armrest. She reached for her bag. She would leave, alone. Then a voice cut in. "Calm. Steady. I think that's enough." Every head turned. A man stood at the door, tall, broad, in a worn denim jacket and dusty work boots. He walked with quiet purpose, eyes locked not on the heckler, but on her. He passed the stunned host and came to her side. His hand rested gently on the back of her chair. "Are you ready to go?" he asked, softly. Isabel blinked. Was this another cruel joke? But his gaze was steady, kind, not pitying, just present. She gave a small nod. The man turned to the one who'd insulted her. "She deserves better." And with that, he slowly turned the chair, guiding her toward the door. No one stopped them. No one dared. They left behind a stunned silence, and the image of a man who didn't raise his voice, only his presence. Outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. Isabel felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. He let go of the chair once they reached the sidewalk. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I just couldn't watch that happen." She looked up at him, his stubbled jaw, grease-stained collar, tired eyes. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. He shrugged, didn't need to. Isabel exhaled slowly. "Thank you." He smiled. "Liam." "Isabel." "Nice to meet you, Isabel, despite everything." A soft, surprised laugh escaped her. "Likewise." They stood in silence for a moment, just city sounds and her heartbeat slowing back to normal. "I didn't get to eat," she admitted. "Skipped lunch for, well, that." Liam glanced back at the restaurant. "Doesn't look like you missed much." Then, after a beat, "There's a food truck nearby, nothing fancy. But the grilled cheese? Legendary." She hesitated, then nodded. He grinned. "Let's go." And for the first time in a long while, Isabel Hartley followed someone, not out of fear or obligation, but choice. Because sometimes healing begins with a disaster, and sometimes the right person walks in just when the world walks out. If this moment stirred something inside you, if you've ever felt unseen, unwanted, or underestimated, hit that hype button to let others know they're not alone. This story is just getting started. The evening breeze carried the faint scent of rain-soaked asphalt, as Isabel wheeled slowly down the quiet street. Liam walked beside her, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. He didn't hover. He didn't push unless she asked. He just walked, steady and unhurried, matching her pace without effort. "Did you eat anything in there before?" He trailed off, his voice careful. She shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I didn't exactly have the chance." He chuckled softly. "I didn't think so. There's a street vendor a couple of blocks away. Nothing fancy, plastic chairs, paper plates, but their grilled skewers are worth it. Want to give it a try?" Her instinct was to refuse. She was used to private dining rooms, curated menus, the weight of expectation. Street food was something she hadn't touched in years. But the warmth in his tone, casual and without pressure, made her pause. "Why not?" she said. "Good," he replied, a smile breaking across his face. "Because I was already heading there." They turned the corner and found a modest food stall lit by strings of yellow bulbs. The scent of garlic, soy, and roasted meat filled the air. Families sat on mismatched stools, laughter and clinking bottles weaving through the night. Isabel felt strangely out of place and yet oddly at ease. Liam ordered for them both, 2 skewers, fried dumplings, and a bottle of sparkling water. When the plates arrived, the server leaned clumsily, and a streak of thick sauce slipped from the skewer, splattering across Isabel's shoe and ankle. She froze. Heat flushed her face. This was the kind of accident she dreaded, moments that magnified her chair, her difference, her inability to maneuver quickly. She braced for awkward apologies, for the server's flustered pity, for Liam's uncomfortable silence. Instead, Liam calmly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded cloth rag, the kind a mechanic might always carry. "Hold on," he murmured. Before she could protest, he crouched beside her. With easy, unhurried movements, he dabbed the sauce from the leather of her shoe. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he lifted her foot gently, supporting it with both hands, and placed it back onto the footrest of her chair. Not a hint of hesitation, not a flicker of pity. Just care, respect. Isabel's breath caught. No one touched her like that, not since before the accident. Every gesture from others had been heavy with awkwardness or dripping with condescension. But Liam's touch was different. Steady, practical, kind. Her eyes stung unexpectedly. She blinked fast, willing the tears away. "There," he said simply, straightening. "Good as new." She opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure what words could carry the weight of her gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered finally. He shrugged lightly. "It's just sauce." "No," she said, her voice firmer this time. "It isn't." Their eyes met across the small table. For a moment, the chatter of the crowd, the hiss of the grill, the clatter of chopsticks, all of it faded. Isabel saw in him something she hadn't expected. A man who looked at her without agenda, without judgment. She realized with a sharp ache in her chest that this was the first time in years someone had treated her as whole, not defined by what she had lost, but seen for who she was. Liam broke the silence with a smile, gesturing to the skewers. "Eat before it gets cold. Trust me, food like this doesn't wait." She laughed softly, a sound she hardly recognized as her own. She took a bite, and for the first time that night, the taste of something simple and real spread through her. Garlic, ginger, the char of the grill. It wasn't just food, it was freedom. And sitting under the glow of yellow bulbs, across from a mechanic with grease still on his hands, Isabel Hartley, CEO, heiress, survivor, felt something she hadn't in years. She felt seen. The days that followed weren't marked by grand gestures or lavish gifts. They were simple, gentle, ordinary in a way that felt rare and irreplaceable. Liam and Isabel started to meet more often, first by coincidence, then by quiet intention. Neither said it aloud, but each encounter pulled them into a rhythm only they seemed to understand. Sometimes it was a short walk, well, a slow roll, as Isabel joked, through streets where food carts glowed and children danced to street performers. Other days they shared snacks on a park bench, watching life unfold in all its messy beauty. One evening, they passed a young violinist playing under a street lamp. His case was nearly empty. Liam dropped a few bills in and turned to Isabel. "Want to sit for a while?" She nodded. They didn't speak much. The music filled the silence between them, and as the final note faded, Isabel noticed her hands were clasped in her lap, not out of habit or anxiety, but because she had let her guard down. Every shared moment became a quiet thread in something delicate, slowly forming. At a cinnamon bun stall, Liam reached over and wiped a bit of powdered sugar from the corner of her lip. She froze at first, then laughed, loud and free. "I used to hate that," she said, "people touching my face, like I couldn't do it myself. But you, it doesn't feel like that." "Like what?" he asked. "Like pity." He didn't reply, but his eyes said everything. That night, Isabel came home and opened her sketchbook for the first time in 5 years. Her hands moved with unexpected purpose. She drew Liam crouched under a streetlight, sleeves rolled up, tools in hand, helping a stranger with a stalled engine. She captured the quiet focus in his eyes, the strength in his posture. There was no performance in him, no ego, just care. When she showed him the drawing a few days later, he stared at it for a long time. "No one's ever drawn me before," he said, barely above a whisper. Something about his voice, genuine, disbelieving, hit her hard. She had been painted, interviewed, followed by cameras, but Liam had lived in the corners, unseen. "Then I'm glad I was the first," she said. He smiled, small, shy, and handed the drawing back like it was something fragile. They spent an afternoon at a neighborhood festival, watching kids run with balloon animals and old couples sway to a jazz band. On the way back to her place, Liam hesitated, then pulled something from his jacket pocket. "I got you something," he said. She tilted her head. "Another cinnamon bun?" He laughed. "Not this time." He held out a small, hand-tied bouquet of wild daisies. A little uneven, a little sun-wilted, real. Tucked between the stems was a folded piece of notebook paper. Isabel unfolded it, her hands trembling. In his rough handwriting were the words, "You deserve to be seen as you, not as a chair." She didn't speak. The tears came quietly. For years, she'd been admired, obeyed, even feared, but not seen. People noticed the CEO, the headlines, the wheelchair. Liam saw Isabel. Not her company, not her past, not her limitations. Just her. When she looked up, Liam's face was unreadable, unsure if he'd said too much. But she didn't let him wonder for long. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me," she whispered. He nodded, voice soft. "It's the truth." As the sky darkened and string lights flickered on around them, Isabel leaned her head gently on his shoulder. She didn't know where this was going. She didn't know how long it would last. But for the first time in years, her heart felt full, and the world, once cold and sharp, began to feel warm again. The night was unusually still, the kind of stillness that made every soft sound feel closer, more intimate. They sat side by side on the rooftop of Liam's apartment building, legs stretched out, backs resting against old lawn chairs that creaked with each breath. A Bluetooth speaker hummed low beside them, soft jazz and acoustic covers blending with the wind. Liam handed her a cup of warm cider, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Isabel murmured a quiet thank you, her voice nearly lost to the breeze. He didn't speak. He never pushed her to. They sipped in silence until the song changed, and Isabel finally spoke, not with grand declarations, but with a memory. "My mother loved this song," she said softly. "She used to sing it while brushing her hair. Every night. Same time, same melody." Liam turned slightly toward her, listening. "I was 15 when I told her I didn't want to sing anymore. that I wanted to study business instead of music. She didn't argue, just said, "Whatever you do it with your whole heart." A faint, sad smile tugged at her lips. And I did. I built the company, broke records, became CEO. I did it with everything I had. But she wasn't there to see it. The words hovered in the air. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, succeeded loud enough, I could drown out the guilt, the emptiness. Liam set down his cup, silent. He didn't offer platitudes, just leaned back and whispered, "She already saw the part of you that mattered most." Isabel blinked. Her throat tightened. "She did," she said quietly, "and I think I forgot who that girl was." The silence returned, gentle, not heavy. Then Liam spoke. "I dropped out of college," he said. "Mechanical engineering. Had a full ride." She turned to him, surprised. "My sister had a kid, then a relapse. Drugs. Disappeared. My mom was already sick, so I stepped in. Got a job at the shop. Changed diapers between oil changes." He gave a dry chuckle. "Not exactly the life I pictured." Isabel reached out, touched his forearm, the first time she'd initiated contact. "That must have been hard." "It was," he said, "but he's everything now. That kid saved me." They stared ahead again, two people who'd lost deeply and loved anyway. Later that week, Liam texted, "If you're free tonight, I want to show you something." She was. He picked her up in his old truck, carefully helping her into the passenger seat before loading her chair in the back. They drove quietly through winding roads, city lights fading behind them. When they stopped, Isabel's breath caught. The old stone bridge. "This used to be," she began. "Your favorite spot," Liam finished. "I know." Her eyes widened. "I looked up the places you mentioned once," he said. "You said you used to come here with your mom, that it was your dream to walk across it one day." Her voice cracked. "I can't walk it." "I know," he said gently, "but we can still cross it." He opened her door, brought out the chair, and wheeled her gently onto the path. The bridge wasn't long, but it arched in the middle. From the top, the river curved below, framed by trees that bowed like guardians. They stopped near the center. "I always imagined holding her hand here," Isabel whispered. "Thought maybe if I came back, I'd feel her again." Liam said nothing. He simply took her hand. Warm, steady. He squeezed it. "I don't feel alone anymore," she said. He turned to her, his eyes soft. "You never were." And on that quiet bridge, Isabel Hartley understood something she hadn't before. Healing doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in shared silence, in gentle hands, and in someone who sees you not for what you lost, but for who you are. The text had gone unanswered for days. Then, a week. Isabel stared at her phone screen, thumb hovering over the same message she had rewritten 3 times. "Hey, are you okay? Was it something I said? Can we talk?" All marked delivered, none marked read. Liam had vanished. It made no sense. Their last evening had been quiet, gentle. He had kissed her hand goodnight, whispered, "You matter." But now, nothing. She scrolled up the thread, reading old messages like a woman trying to remember how happiness had once sounded. And then, suddenly, a new message appeared. "I met someone else. You deserve better." 8 words. No punctuation, no warmth, no explanation. The breath left her body. Her hands trembled as she lowered the phone to her lap. Outside her apartment window, the world continued as usual. Cars passed, someone laughed down the street, a dog barked. But inside, she was still broken. Again, the memory of her mother's funeral blurred with the moment her father said she'd never find someone willing to carry her dead weight. And now, even Liam, Gentle, warm, honest Liam had proven him right. She didn't cry right away. Instead, she went numb, rolled her wheelchair to the living room, turned off the lights, sat in the dark. Meanwhile, across town, Liam wiped blood from his split lip and pressed an ice pack to his jaw. His shop was quiet now. The others had gone home. The fluorescent light flickered above him as he slumped against the metal drawers. His shoulder throbbed from where the man had punched him, twice. He didn't even see them coming, just two suits waiting in the alley after his late shift. No conversation, just fists and a warning. You don't belong in her world. Walk away, mechanic. One of them had said her name. That was the part that made his stomach twist. They weren't random thugs. They were sent. From her father, he knew. Liam sat with the knowledge, like a stone in his gut. He hadn't known Isabel's full identity until a week ago. The CEO, the legacy, the billion-dollar empire. She had told him she ran a company, but not that company. He had never looked her up. He hadn't needed to. But someone at the shop had shown him a business magazine with her face on the cover. "Isn't that your girl?" they'd joke. He smiled and nodded, but something inside him turned cold. And now this. Pain bloomed through his ribs as he leaned forward to grab his phone. He opened her messages, read every one. His fingers hovered above the screen. He wanted to reply, to explain, to tell her that none of this was her fault. But he didn't, as Hornby expected, because how could he bring her into his world, into greasy overalls, overdue rent, and late-night fights in alleyways? She deserved someone who could protect her from this, someone who didn't have to choose between dignity and survival. So he made the cruelest choice he could think of. He lied, and he told himself it was for her. Back in her apartment, Isabel sat in the dark long after the phone went silent. The ache wasn't just about Liam leaving. It was the familiarity of it. People always left. Her mother, her father, emotionally. And now Liam, physically. The worst part wasn't the absence. It was how fast the silence filled in. She finally wheeled herself into her studio, staring blankly at the unfinished sketch on her desk. Liam under the streetlight, adjusting the wheel of a stranger's bike, unaware she'd been drawing him. She ripped it from the sketchbook, crumpled it, and let it fall. But even as it lay there, broken and wrinkled, she couldn't shake the memory of his hands lifting her foot so gently at that street food stall. No words, just care. She had trusted that. And now she wasn't sure what had been real. The rain was relentless. It came down in a steady curtain, drenching the empty streets and washing the city in a dull gray. Streetlights blurred into soft halos of gold as water streaked down everything, rooftops, windows, pavement. Isabel didn't care. Her cardigan clung to her skin. Her hair, once elegantly curled, now lay plastered and heavy over her shoulders. Water dripped from her lashes, soaked through the blanket she had tossed over her legs before leaving the house. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to move, had to breathe, had to feel anything but the ache clawing at her chest. The wheels of her chair spun slower with each block, dragging against the wet sidewalk. Her hands, pale and trembling, gripped the rims as she pushed forward. Each breath came sharp, choked. Rain mixed with tears until she couldn't tell one from the other. Liam's message echoed in her mind. I met someone else. The lie was too clean, too cold. It wasn't him. She knew it wasn't him. And yet, the silence had been real. The absence. The abandonment. Again. Her throat ached with the weight of everything unsaid. She turned onto the familiar street near Liam's garage, more out of muscle memory than intent. Her heart knew its way there, even if her mind was trying to forget. The rain intensified. She paused under a flickering lamppost, blinking through the haze. Her hands slipped on the rims. Her breath hitched. And then, headlights. A car, fast, too fast, rounded the corner, its tires screeching against the soaked asphalt. Isabel tried to move, her hands scrambled against the wet metal, but the wheel caught on a crack in the pavement. The car veered, a horn blared, and then, arms, strong, familiar, lifting her, pulling her up and out in a single motion. The world tilted, rain exploded around them, and the next thing she knew, she was in someone's arms, pressed tightly to a warm chest, the impact of what could have happened slamming into her all at once. She gasped, looked up. Liam. His face was soaked, his hair dripping, his eyes wild. His chest rose and fell in short, panicked breaths. "You," she began, but the words caught. "I saw you crossing the street," he said, voice raw, and then the car. God, Isabel. Her bottom lip quivered. Her eyes filled again. "You left," she whispered. "You left me." Liam's arms tightened. "I thought letting you go would protect you," his voice cracked. "I thought if I disappeared, your life would stay safe, untouched by all the mess that is me." She stared at him, stunned. "The message," she choked, "you lied." His nod was small, tortured. "I couldn't say the truth. Your father," he swallowed, "he sent people after me, told me to leave you alone. I didn't want you caught in the middle." Isabel's hand clenched the front of his soaked jacket. Her entire body shook, not just from the cold, but from the torrent of emotion crashing through her. "You think I needed protection from you?" she said. "What I needed was the truth. What I needed was you." Liam closed his eyes, forehead resting against hers, rain sliding down both their faces like falling stars. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. Her fingers rose to his face, brushed away a drop or a tear. And then, without thinking, without fear, she leaned forward and kissed him. There, in the middle of the empty street, soaked to the bone, heart pounding, breath shaking, she kissed him. It was not graceful. It was not quiet. It was everything. All the pain, all the waiting, all the walls crashing down in one soft collision of lips and trust, and finally choosing love, without shame. When they broke apart, their foreheads remained pressed together. "Liam," she whispered, "I don't care about money, about image, about what the world thinks I should be." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. "I want this. I want you." He let out a shaky breath. "You're going to get soaked," he said. She smiled through tears. "Too late." And he looked down at her. And for the first time since the night she rolled away from that restaurant in shame, Isabel felt whole. They stayed like that a moment longer, the world softening around them in the rain. And somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed, a dog barked. Life resumed. But in that moment, everything changed. The grand hallway of the Hartley estate was colder than usual. Marble floors stretched endlessly beneath chandeliers that sparkled like ice. Isabel's wheelchair moved silently over the polished surface, Liam walking beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. He had never belonged in a place like this, and he knew it. But he didn't flinch. At the end of the corridor, her father waited. William Hartley stood like a statue near the fireplace, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He didn't move when they entered. His gaze flicked from his daughter to the man beside her and darkened. "I see you've brought him here," he said flatly. "I have," Isabel replied. Her voice was calm but unwavering. "Because I want you to look at him when you tell me why I don't deserve love." William's jaw tightened. "That man has no place in your life." "Has more of a place than anyone else ever has," she said. "Including the men you tried to set me up with." William stepped forward. "You are the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. Your life is not your own. You're responsible for an empire. You're a Hartley." Isabel drew in a breath. Her hands gripped the wheels of her chair, knuckles pale. Then slowly, she looked up and said what had weighed on her chest for years. "I never asked for any of this," she said. "I inherited it, I worked for it, I honored it. But I won't let it define whether or not I'm allowed to be happy." William's expression cracked, only slightly. "And what?" he said bitterly. "You'll give it all up? For him?" "If that's what it takes," she answered. "No hesitation. I will." Liam turned toward her, startled. "Isabel!" But she held his gaze. "I mean it." Her father stared at her for a long time. His eyes, once so full of fire, of ambition, now dimmed with disbelief. "Then go," he said at last. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to walk back in." A heavy silence fell, and then, without a word, Isabel turned her chair toward the door. Liam followed, pausing only to glance back once at the man still standing in his frozen world. He said nothing. Outside, the evening air was thick with the scent of pine and distant rain. The sky had darkened, but the clouds had not yet opened again. The path that led down the driveway glistened under the streetlights. They moved together in silence. When they reached the end of the driveway, Isabel let out a slow breath. "That was easier than I expected," she said. Liam didn't respond at first. Then, as they reached the edge of the property, he stopped walking. She turned to look at him. "What is it?" Liam crouched slightly, so they were eye level. His hands, rough from work, found hers, still cool from the night air. "You shouldn't have to give up your life for me," he said quietly. "I didn't give up my life," Isabel said. "I walked away from a prison I mistook for a legacy." She paused. Then, softer, "You gave me the courage to want more than just survival." He looked at her, eyes glassy, lips parted. "I don't need the world," she whispered. "I just need you there when I fall apart." Liam swallowed hard, and instead of answering, he simply took her hand and held it tight. He didn't need to speak. His eyes said everything. "I'm not going anywhere." The sun cast a warm glow over the garden behind the old auto garage. Ivy climbed the brick walls, and wildflowers lined the wooden archway, decorated with hand-tied ribbons and fresh daisies. A few string lights flickered above, swaying gently in the breeze. It was not grand or luxurious, but it felt real. 3 months had passed since Isabel Hartley walked away from her father's estate. Today, surrounded by potted plants, borrowed chairs, and soft jazz playing from a speaker on the garage steps, she sat in her wheelchair, smiling. Liam stood nearby, adjusting the collar of his white shirt. It was wrinkled despite his best effort, but she thought he looked more handsome than any man she had ever seen in a suit. Their small engagement ceremony had drawn just a handful of friends, neighbors, and co-workers from the garage, but the space felt full of warmth, laughter, and people who came not from duty, but love. Luna, Liam's niece, stood proud as the flower girl, wearing a daisy crown and carrying a basket that once held car parts. Isabel glanced at the little card table holding a simple white cake, 2 champagne glasses, and the bouquet Liam had picked himself from a corner florist. She hadn't cried all morning, until she saw him, William Hartley, her father. He stood at the edge of the garden, not in a suit but in a plain gray sweater and slacks. His hair was grayer, his stance uncertain, out of place. The music softened, conversations hushed. Liam straightened. Isabel's breath caught. William stepped forward slowly, stopping in front of Liam. The silence was tight. Then he extended his hand. "Lover, that's all I ask." Liam stared, stunned, then shook his hand firmly. A wave of applause rose around them, gentle, genuine. William didn't smile, but his eyes flicked toward Isabel, glassy and searching. It was enough. She looked away, blinking hard. Later, after the cake was cut and the guests wandered off to the benches in the backyard, Liam approached with a quiet grin and held out his hand. "Come with me," he said. She tilted her head. "Where?" He only smiled and guided her wheelchair down a narrow path behind the garden, leading toward the beach beyond the property. It wasn't famous, just a quiet stretch of sand where the water kissed the shore in slow, rhythmic waves. At the edge, he stopped. "Are you sure?" she asked. He nodded, then knelt in front of her. With gentle strength, he helped her stand. Her legs trembled, but his arms held steady. She leaned into him, fingers gripping his shoulders, his hand firm at her waist. The sand was soft beneath her bare feet, cool and grainy. It clung to her skin like memory. Isabel gasped. Tears blurred her vision. "I haven't felt this since." "You don't have to say it," he said. They stood like that for a long while, her first steps on sand in over 5 years, each one small. But hers. She looked up, cheeks wet with quiet tears. "You caught me when I was falling," she whispered, "in every way." He brushed her hair from her face. "And I'll be here, every step after." She pressed her forehead to his. "I love you. I love you more." The breeze rolled in, salt and softness in the air. The waves whispered. Together, they took another step. No audience. No spotlight. Just the beach, the breeze, and the beginning of something new. And in that moment, under the wide-open sky, Isabel Hartley finally felt what she had been chasing for years. Peace. And the courage to believe this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Thank you for being here with Isabel and Liam, a story of healing, love, and second chances. If it touched your heart, tap the hype button to support more stories that matter. Don't forget to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt journeys that remind us, even in our most broken moments, love can find a way. Until next time, stay soft, stay brave, and never stop believing in the quiet power of love.
No one spoke to the female millionaire CEO until the janitor's daughter wiped her tears without saying a word. Just before the story starts, wherever you are on your journey, consider this your sign to keep going. The marble floors of the Grand Meridian Hotel echoed with the click of expensive heels. But tonight, those sounds felt hollow to Victoria Sterling. At 30, she commanded a tech empire worth $200 million, yet here she sat in the opulent lobby at 11:47 p.m., tears streaming down her perfectly sculpted face. The golden chandelier above cast dancing shadows that seemed to mock her success, each crystal reflecting a life that suddenly felt meaningless. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" The night receptionist's voice was professional but distant, the way people spoke to her now, always careful, always calculating what they might gain. His nameplate read Robert, and he'd been watching her for the past 20 minutes from behind his mahogany desk. Victoria didn't answer. She couldn't. The words from Dr. Martinez still rang in her ears from 3 hours ago. "The cancer is aggressive, Victoria. Pancreatic adenocarcinoma stage 3. We need to start chemotherapy immediately. Without treatment, you have maybe 6 months." At 30, she was supposed to be invincible. Her company, Sterling Technologies, had just landed the biggest contract in its history with the Department of Defense, a $40 million deal that would revolutionize military communications. She had everything money could buy, yet she'd never felt more alone. The hotel lobby was nearly empty on this bitter February night in Manhattan. A few business travelers sat scattered across leather chairs, absorbed in their phones, completely oblivious to the woman whose world had just shattered. The massive stone fireplace crackled softly, its flames dancing hypnotically, but its warmth couldn't reach the ice that had formed around Victoria's heart since the diagnosis. She remembered her last conversation with her mother, dead now for 8 years from the same disease. "Sweetheart, money can't buy everything," Margaret Sterling had whispered on her deathbed in Mount Sinai Hospital. "It can't buy time, and it can't buy love." Victoria had dismissed it then, driven by ambition and the desperate need to prove herself in a man's world. She'd thrown herself into building her empire, working 18-hour days, sleeping in her corner office more often than her penthouse apartment. Now, those words haunted her like a curse she couldn't escape. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd built a fortune creating technology that connected people across the globe. Yet she had no one to call, no one who would care if she disappeared tomorrow. Her phone, a prototype from her own company worth more than most people's cars, sat silent beside her Hermes purse. A soft sound made her look up through blurry eyes. A small figure approached, a little girl with chocolate-brown pigtails, maybe 5 years old, wearing a simple pink dress that had clearly been washed and mended countless times. The child's dark eyes held a wisdom that seemed impossible for her age, and she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd learned to navigate adult spaces carefully. Without saying a word, the little girl reached into her tiny pocket and pulled out a crumpled tissue, the kind that comes in cheap dispensers, not the imported Egyptian cotton ones Victoria was accustomed to. She gently touched Victoria's cheek, wiping away tears that Victoria hadn't even realized were still falling, her small fingers as gentle as butterfly wings. "My daddy says crying makes the hurt come out so healing can come in," the child whispered in a voice like summer rain, her words carrying the unconscious poetry that only children possess. Victoria stared, speechless. When was the last time anyone had touched her with such pure, unconditional kindness? When had anyone last offered comfort without expecting something in return? "Sophia, Sophia Marie, get back here right now," a man's voice called urgently from across the lobby, panic evident in his tone. Marcus Washington hurried across the marble floor, his blue janitorial uniform still damp with cleaning solution from the evening's work on the 15th floor executive suites. At 33, his broad shoulders carried more than just the weight of mop buckets and industrial vacuum cleaners. They carried the dreams of a man determined to give his daughter everything he never had, and the grief of losing the love of his life 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days ago. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," Marcus said breathlessly as he reached them, his calloused hands gently taking Sophia's shoulders. The hands of a man who worked with them every day, who'd built playground equipment and fixed broken toys, who'd learned to braid hair from YouTube videos because his little girl deserved to look pretty. "She wandered off while I was finishing up the 20th floor conference room. Sophia, you can't just walk away from Mrs. Chen's desk like that." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Victoria's tear-stained face under the lobby's golden light. Something in her green eyes, a brokenness he recognized from his own mirror during those first months after Jennifer's funeral, made his prepared apology fade away like smoke. "She's fine," Victoria managed, her voice barely above a whisper, rough from crying. She looked down at Sophia, who was still standing close, her small hand resting on Victoria's silk Armani sleeve like she belonged there. She helped me, more than she knows." Marcus studied Victoria's face with the careful attention he'd learned working nights in the hotel. In his 3 years on the cleaning crew at the Grand Meridian, he'd seen plenty of wealthy guests come and go through these marble halls. Most barely acknowledged his existence, looking through him like he was part of the furniture. But this woman seemed different, vulnerable in a way that her expensive clothes and jewelry couldn't hide, broken in a way that money couldn't fix. "Daddy, the pretty lady, was sad," Sophia explained, looking up at her father with those impossibly wise dark eyes she'd inherited from her mother. "Like you were after Mommy went to heaven to be with the angels. Remember? You used to cry when you thought I was sleeping, but I could hear you in the kitchen." Marcus felt his chest tighten like someone had wrapped steel bands around his ribs. Sophia's mother, Jennifer Marie Washington, had died in a car accident on a rainy Thursday evening 2 years ago, when Sophia was just 3. A drunk driver running a red light had stolen his wife, his best friend, his entire future in one devastating moment. Since then, it had been just the two of them against the world, a janitor with a GED and a little girl who saw angels where others saw only emptiness. He worked the night shift at the hotel from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., then picked up landscaping jobs during the day whenever he could find them, all to afford their tiny one-bedroom apartment in Queens where Sophia slept on a daybed in the living room and dreamed of becoming a teacher like her mommy had been. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad too, baby girl," Marcus said softly, kneeling to Sophia's level while keeping his eyes respectfully averted from Victoria. He'd learned long ago that people like her, people in $1,000 suits who lived in penthouses, existed in a different universe than people like him. Even when they're all grown up, they still get hurt inside. But Victoria surprised him by speaking directly to his daughter, her voice gentler than he'd expected. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sophia Marie Washington." the little girl announced proudly, standing straighter. I'm 5 3/4 years old. Daddy says I'm going to be really smart like Mommy was. She was a teacher before she went to heaven. Victoria felt something crack deep in her chest. Not the cancer eating away at her pancreas, but something deeper, more fundamental. A wall she'd built brick by brick over years of corporate battles and boardroom betrayals. That's a beautiful name for a beautiful, smart girl, she said, and meant it more than any words she'd spoken in months. Marcus stood slowly, uncertainty written across his features. In his world, conversations with guests, especially wealthy ones crying in hotel lobbies at nearly midnight, simply didn't happen. He was invisible, part of the background, someone who cleaned up messes and emptied trash cans while the important people conducted their important lives. But something about this moment felt different, suspended outside the normal rules. I should get her home, he said quietly, glancing at the reception desk where Mrs. Chen, the elderly night security coordinator, was pretending not to watch them. Mrs. Chen keeps an eye on her during my shift, but it's way past Sophia's bedtime. She has preschool tomorrow morning at 9. Wait, Victoria said suddenly, the word escaping before she could stop it. Both Marcus and Sophia turned back to her and she felt exposed under their gentle attention. Thank you, both of you. I haven't had anyone show me kindness like this in years. Marcus nodded awkwardly, still unsure of the protocol. In his experience, wealthy people didn't thank janitors for anything, let alone for something their children had done. Come on, Soph. Say goodbye to the nice lady, and then we need to catch the 12:15 subway before the next one isn't until 1 a.m. But Sophia had other plans entirely. She stepped closer to Victoria, tilted her head with the serious expression children wear when they're about to say something they believe is very important, and asked, Are you sick? You look like Daddy did when he had the big hurt inside after Mommy died. The kind of hurt that lives in your body and makes you cry even when nothing bad is happening right that minute. Victoria's breath caught in her throat like a physical thing. How could this 5-year-old child see what teams of board members, business associates, and supposed friends had missed entirely? How could someone so young recognize the particular grief of facing mortality? Sophia, Marcus said quickly, embarrassment coloring his voice as he placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. We don't ask personal questions like that. It's not polite to— It's okay, Victoria interrupted, surprising them both with the firmness in her voice. She looked directly into Sophia's trusting dark eyes, seeing something pure and honest that she'd forgotten existed in the world. Yes, sweetheart. I am sick. Very sick. Did you tell the doctors about it? Sophia asked with the matter-of-fact concern of a child who'd spent too much time around hospitals and medical conversations. Doctors are good at fixing people when they're broken. They helped Grandpa Joe when his heart got broken inside his chest. Marcus's throat tightened as memories flooded back. Joe Washington, his father and the only parent he'd ever really known, had suffered a massive heart attack 6 months ago while working his second job as a security guard at a warehouse in Brooklyn. The medical bills had nearly destroyed Marcus financially, eating up the small savings he'd managed to accumulate over years of careful budgeting and sacrifice. He was still paying them off $20 here, $50 there, whenever he could manage it without letting Sophia go without something she needed. Victoria watched the silent exchange between father and daughter, seeing layers of struggle and love and determination that her world of corporate maneuvering had never prepared her to understand. The doctors are going to try to help me, Victoria said carefully, choosing her words for Sophia's young ears while her mind raced with the brutal reality Dr. Martinez had laid out. Chemotherapy starting Monday, surgery if she was lucky, months of treatment that might buy her time but couldn't promise her life. But sometimes being sick is very complicated, even for doctors. Sophia nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense to her. That's okay. Sometimes it takes a long time to fix things that are really broken. Like when I broke Daddy's favorite mug, the one with Mommy's picture on it. We couldn't fix it with glue, but Daddy found someone special who could put it back together so you could barely see the cracks. Marcus felt his heart squeeze. That mug, a Father's Day gift from Jennifer 3 years ago, had been his most treasured possession. When Sophia accidentally knocked it off the kitchen counter last month, she'd cried for hours, convinced she'd destroyed something irreplaceable. He'd spent 2 weeks and $60 he couldn't really afford to have it professionally restored by an artist in Greenwich Village, because some things were worth more than money. Your daddy sounds like a very smart man, Victoria said, glancing up at Marcus with something that might have been respect. It was a foreign expression on the face of someone from her world, and it made him stand a little straighter. He is, Sophia confirmed. He knows how to fix lots of things. He fixed my bike when the chain came off, and he learned how to make French braids from the computer, so my hair would look pretty like the other girls at school. And he makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the whole world, even though we only have the regular cheese, not the fancy kind. Victoria found herself smiling, actually smiling, for the first time since sitting in Dr. Martinez's sterile office. French braids are very difficult. I never learned how to do them. Daddy could teach you, Sophia offered with the generous innocence of childhood. He's really good at teaching things. He taught me how to ride my bike and how to tie my shoes and how to read some words before I even started school. The idea of Marcus Washington, this janitor with calloused hands and a kind face, teaching her anything seemed absurd. Victoria Sterling learned from Harvard professors and Fortune 500 CEOs and international consultants who charged $1,000 an hour for their expertise. But something about Sophia's simple faith in her father's abilities touched a place in Victoria's heart she'd forgotten existed. "That's very sweet of you to offer," Victoria said gently. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, probably around her own age, with intelligent brown eyes and the kind of steady presence that came from carrying real responsibility. "You've raised an incredible daughter." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Compliments about his parenting were rare and precious. Usually he only heard criticism from other parents at Sophia's school who looked down on his work uniform and single-parent status. "She's the best thing I've ever done," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "Jennifer would be so proud of the little person she's becoming." "Tell me about Jennifer," Victoria found herself saying, then immediately regretted it. She had no right to ask such personal questions, no business inserting herself into their private grief. But Marcus didn't seem offended. Maybe it was the late hour, or the strange intimacy of the empty lobby, or the way Sophia had broken down the normal barriers with her innocent kindness. But he found himself answering. "She was a second-grade teacher at PS 163 in Queens," he said, his voice taking on the soft quality people use when talking about the dead. "She could make any kid love reading, even the ones who thought they hated school. She used to say that every child was just a story waiting to be told. They just needed someone to help them find their voice." Victoria listened with an attention she hadn't given to anyone's personal story in years. Watching Marcus's face transform as he spoke about his late wife, the harsh fluorescent lighting of the lobby seemed to soften around them, creating an intimate bubble in the vast marble space. "Jennifer grew up in foster care," Marcus continued, Sophia leaning against his leg as she listened to the familiar story. "She bounced between 12 different homes before she aged out at 18. Never got adopted, never had a real family until—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Until she made one with me and Sophia. She used to say that family isn't about blood or money or having the perfect house. It's about showing up for each other, especially when things get difficult." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Jennifer Washington, a woman who'd had nothing, had understood something fundamental that Victoria, with all her wealth and success, had never grasped. She'd spent her adult life believing that achievement was everything, that building an empire was the same as building a life. But sitting here at midnight, facing her own mortality, she realized how empty her victories felt. "She sounds like she was a wonderful person," Victoria said quietly, surprised by the genuine emotion in her own voice. "Sophia is lucky to have had her as a mother, even if it wasn't for long enough. She still has her," Sophia said with the matter-of-fact certainty that children bring to discussions of death and love. "Mommy's not gone. She's just in a different place. She talks to me sometimes when I'm dreaming, and she tells me to take care of Daddy because he gets sad and forgets to eat sometimes." Marcus's hand found Sophia's head, stroking her soft curls with infinite tenderness. "That's right, baby girl. Mommy's always with us, especially when we're helping other people the way she used to help her students." Victoria felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the ones she'd been crying earlier. Less about fear and self-pity, more about recognition of something beautiful she'd been missing her entire adult life. "How do you do it?" she asked Marcus suddenly. "How do you stay so positive after losing someone you loved so much?" Marcus considered the question seriously. It wasn't one he got asked often. Most people assumed that single fathers, especially poor ones, were either heroes or failures with no complex emotions in between. "I don't think it's about staying positive," he said slowly. "It's about choosing what to focus on. I can spend my energy being angry about what I lost, Or I can spend it making sure Sophia grows up knowing she's loved and that her mother's life meant something. Some days are harder than others, but he looked down at his daughter. She keeps me anchored to what matters. What matters? Victoria asked, though she wasn't sure she was ready for the answer. Being present, showing up, making sure the people you love know they're loved while you still have time to tell them. Marcus paused, then added with quiet intensity, Jennifer used to say that the only wealth that really counts is the wealth of connections you build with other people. Everything else is just stuff you leave behind. The words settled into the silence between them, like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that seemed to expand infinitely. Victoria thought about her penthouse apartment, filled with expensive art that she'd bought as investments rather than for joy. She thought about her closet full of designer clothes that she wore to impress people she didn't particularly like. She thought about her bank accounts and stock portfolios and the empire she'd built, and realized that none of it would matter in 6 months if Dr. Martinez was right. I don't think I've ever really learned how to connect with people, Victoria admitted, the confession feeling dangerous and necessary. I've spent so long trying to be successful that I forgot how to be human. Sophia stepped closer and took Victoria's manicured hand in her small, warm one. That's okay. Learning new things is fun. Daddy says it's never too late to learn something important. The simple wisdom of a 5-year-old hit Victoria with unexpected force, causing her carefully constructed walls to crumble just a little more. She looked down at Sophia's small hand holding hers, marveling at how natural the gesture felt, despite how foreign physical affection had become in her isolated world of corporate power plays and boardroom strategies. Your daddy is very wise, Victoria said, glancing up at Marcus, who was watching the interaction with a mixture of pride and protectiveness. And so are you, Sophia. Wiser than a lot of adults I know. Marcus checked his watch, a simple Timex that had been his father's, worn and reliable like the man who'd raised him. It's almost 12:30, he said reluctantly. We really do need to catch that subway, sweetheart. You have school tomorrow, and Mrs. Patterson doesn't like it when kids are sleepy in class. But as Sophia started to step away, Victoria felt a panic she hadn't experienced since childhood, the fear of being left alone again, in a world that suddenly seemed too big and too cold. Wait, she said again, more urgently this time. Would it be possible for me to see you both again? The question hung in the air like something fragile and unprecedented. Marcus stared at her, clearly struggling to process the request. In his experience, wealthy people didn't ask to spend time with janitors and their children. There had to be some angle he wasn't seeing, some hidden agenda. I don't understand, he said carefully. Why would you want to see us again? Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks as she realized how her request must sound. Strange, possibly condescending, definitely outside the normal boundaries of their respective worlds. Talking to you both tonight, it's the first time in years that I've felt like I was having a real conversation. Not about business deals or profit margins or stock prices, but about things that actually matter. About loss and love and what it means to be human. She took a shaky breath, aware that she was revealing more about herself than she'd intended. I have cancer, pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I might have 6 months, maybe less. And I realize tonight that I have no one real, to share whatever time I have left. I've built this empire, but I never built a life. I don't even know what that looks like. Marcus felt his worldview shift slightly. He'd assumed her tears were about something fixable, a business deal gone wrong, a relationship problem, the kind of troubles that money could solve. But cancer was different. Cancer was the great equalizer that didn't care about bank accounts or social status. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. That's really tough. Cancer took my mom when I was 15, so I know how scary that diagnosis can be. The thing is, Victoria continued, emboldened by his understanding, tonight with Sophia wiping my tears and you both just being so genuine and kind, I remembered what it felt like to be around people who see you as a person instead of a business opportunity. I know this is unusual, and I know we come from completely different worlds, but would you consider letting me spend some time with you? Maybe I could learn from you what Jennifer meant about real wealth being the connections we build. Sophia looked up at her father with hopeful eyes. Can we, Daddy? She seems really lonely, and Mommy always said we should help lonely people feel better. Marcus found himself at a crossroads he'd never expected to face. Every practical instinct told him to politely decline and walk away. Their lives had nothing in common, and getting involved with wealthy people usually led to complications he couldn't afford. But something in Victoria's eyes reminded him of his own reflection during those first desperate months after Jennifer's death, lost, afraid, and desperately needing human connection. "I guess we could meet for coffee sometime," he said slowly. "There's a diner near Sophia's school where we go on Saturday mornings. Nothing fancy, but they make good pancakes." Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. Relief, gratitude, and the first flutter of hope she'd experienced since Dr. Martinez's devastating words, "I would love that, more than you know." As they exchanged contact information, Sophia squeezed Victoria's hand one more time. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Things that seem really broken can get better. Sometimes they get better in ways you never expected." Marcus scooped up his daughter, and as they walked toward the hotel's exit, Victoria realized that for the first time in years, she was looking forward to tomorrow. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp March air that promised spring was fighting its way through winter's last stand. Victoria Sterling sat in her black Tesla outside Murphy's Diner on Northern Boulevard in Queens, staring at the modest establishment through her tinted windows. The contrast between this world and her usual Saturday brunches at the plaza couldn't have been starker. Cracked sidewalks instead of marble steps, hand-painted signs instead of gold lettering, working families instead of Manhattan's elite. She'd spent 3 sleepless nights since their encounter at the hotel, replaying every word of their conversation, while chemotherapy brochures sat unopened on her kitchen counter. Dr. Martinez had called twice. His secretary had called 4 times, and her business partner David Chen had left increasingly frantic voicemails about the board meeting she'd missed on Thursday. But for the first time in her adult life, Victoria found herself caring more about a coffee date with a janitor and his 5-year-old daughter than about quarterly projections and market dominance. Through the diner's steamed windows, she could see Marcus and Sophia already seated in a corner booth, Sophia's legs swinging freely as she colored in what appeared to be a children's menu. Marcus was reading a newspaper, an actual paper newspaper, while occasionally glancing up to answer whatever questions his daughter was asking. The scene was so perfectly ordinary, so beautifully mundane that Victoria felt like an anthropologist observing a foreign culture. Her phone buzzed insistently. David Chen's name flashed on the screen for the 7th time that morning. She declined the call and turned off the phone entirely, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just a week ago. Victoria Sterling was always available, always connected, always ready to make the decision that would move Sterling Technologies forward. But sitting outside this diner, she realized that Empire felt as distant as the moon. Taking a deep breath that did nothing to calm her racing heart, Victoria stepped out of her car and walked toward the diner's entrance. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, dark jeans that cost more than Marcus probably made in a week, but jeans nonetheless, paired with a simple cashmere sweater and boots that were expensive but understated. She wanted to fit in, though she suspected that goal was impossible regardless of what she wore. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and the warm smell of bacon grease and coffee enveloped her like a hug. The interior was exactly what she'd expected. Vinyl booths with small tiers repaired with duct tape, formica tables with coffee ring stains, and walls covered with faded photographs of local high school sports teams and community events. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where regulars had their own coffee mugs, where the waitresses called customers honey, and meant it. Sophia spotted her first and waved enthusiastically, nearly knocking over her orange juice in her excitement. "Victoria, Victoria, you came." "Daddy, she really came." Marcus looked up from his newspaper and Victoria caught something in his expression, relief maybe, or surprise that she'd actually shown up. He stood as she approached their table, a gesture of politeness that seemed as natural to him as breathing. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said honestly, gesturing for her to sit across from them. "When I gave you the address, I thought maybe you'd change your mind when you saw the neighborhood." "Why would I change my mind?" Victoria asked, sliding into the booth and immediately noticing how the worn vinyl felt different from the leather seats she was accustomed to. "You invited me for coffee and pancakes. This looks like exactly the right place for coffee and pancakes." Sophia beamed at her response. "Daddy makes the best pancakes at home, but these ones are really good too. And they have whipped cream that comes in a can, like a science experiment." A waitress appeared at their table, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and comfortable shoes, wearing a name tag that read Dolores. She poured coffee into Victoria's cup without being asked. the gesture so automatic it was clearly second nature. "What can I get you, honey?" Dolores asked Victoria, her voice carrying the warm efficiency of someone who'd been serving coffee and comfort for decades. Victoria glanced at the laminated menu, overwhelmed by options she'd never encountered in her usual restaurants. No truffle oil, no organic free-range anything, no foam art or single-origin beans, just eggs and pancakes and simple food prepared with care. "I'll have what they're having," Victoria said, nodding toward Marcus and Sophia. "Pancakes, scrambled eggs, and turkey bacon coming right up," Dolores confirmed, refilling Marcus's coffee without him having to ask. "Sophia, you want your usual extra whipped cream on those pancakes?" "Yes, please," Sophia giggled. "And can Victoria have extra whipped cream too? It makes everything taste like birthday cake." As Dolores walked away with their order, Victoria found herself studying the dynamic between Marcus and his daughter with growing fascination. There was an ease between them, a natural rhythm of conversation and affection that spoke of time spent together, of attention paid and love freely given. Sophia chattered about her coloring page, a castle where a brave princess saved herself, while Marcus listened with the kind of focused attention that Victoria had rarely received even in the most important business meetings. "Tell me about your week," Marcus said to Victoria, and she realized it was the first time anyone had asked her that question in months without wanting something specific in return. Victoria hesitated, unsure how to answer. Should she mention the panic attacks that had started Tuesday night? The way she'd stood in her empty penthouse at 3 a.m., wondering what the point of all her success had been. The fact that she'd written and deleted a dozen emails to Dr. Martinez, unable to bring herself to schedule the chemotherapy that might save her life. "It's been complicated," she said finally. Marcus studied Victoria's face across the table, noting the careful way she chose her words and the shadows under her eyes that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. He recognized the look of someone carrying a burden too heavy to share easily. He'd worn that expression himself for months after Jennifer's death, when well-meaning people asked how he was doing, and he had to decide between honesty and politeness. "Complicated how?" he asked gently, stirring sugar into his coffee while Sophia continued working on her coloring page, completely absorbed in selecting the perfect shade of purple for the princess's dress. Victoria found herself caught off guard by the directness of the question. In her world, complicated was usually code for don't ask, a polite way of deflecting curiosity without causing offense. But Marcus's question felt different. Not invasive, but genuinely interested, as if he actually wanted to understand her answer. "I keep thinking about what you said the other night," she began slowly, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug for warmth. "About choosing what to focus on. About the wealth of connections versus the wealth of things. I've been trying to figure out how someone goes about changing their entire life when they're 30 years old and have no idea where to start." Sophia looked up from her coloring. "Daddy changed his whole life after Mommy died. He used to work in an office with a tie and everything, but then he decided to do different work so he could be home with me more. Change is scary, but sometimes it's good." Victoria stared at the little girl, then at Marcus. "You worked in an office?" Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He'd hoped that detail wouldn't come up, at least not so early in their friendship. "I had a job in accounting at a mid-size firm in Manhattan. Nothing glamorous, but it paid well and had good benefits. After Jennifer died, though, I realized that working 60-hour weeks meant missing too much of Sophia's life. The office job would have given her financial security, but it wouldn't have given her a father who was actually present. The admission hung between them like a bridge Victoria wasn't sure how to cross. She'd assumed Marcus had always been a janitor, that his current circumstances reflected his education and ambitions, rather than a conscious choice to prioritize family over financial advancement. The revelation forced her to reconsider everything she thought she understood about success and sacrifice. "So you gave up a career to take care of Sophia?" Victoria asked, trying to process this information against everything she'd believed about professional achievement. "I gave up a job to be a father," Marcus corrected gently. "The career was Jennifer's dream for me, not mine. She thought I should aim higher, push for promotions, build something impressive, but after she died, I realized that the only thing I really wanted to build was a good life for our daughter. The janitorial work pays enough for our needs, and it means I can walk Sophia to school every morning and be home when she gets back." Dolores arrived with their food, setting down plates of pancakes that were perfectly golden and stacked high with butter melting down the sides. Sophia's eyes lit up as the waitress added a generous dollop of whipped cream to her stack. creating a small mountain of sweetness that made her clap her hands in delight. "This looks amazing," Victoria said, and meant it. She couldn't remember the last time food had looked so appealing, so completely free from the pretension and artifice that characterized her usual dining experiences. As they began eating, Sophia kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling Victoria about her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, about the book she was learning to read, about the friend who had taught her how to skip rope during recess. Her stories were small and ordinary, and filled with the kind of wonder that adults forgot how to feel. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm really good at helping other kids with their reading," Sophia announced proudly through a mouthful of pancake. "She says I have a gift for making people feel better when they're frustrated, like Mommy did." Victoria watched Marcus's face transform at the mention of his late wife's teaching abilities. "Jennifer had this incredible ability to see what each student needed," he said softly. "Some kids needed encouragement, some needed challenge, some just needed someone to believe in them. She could look at a child who was struggling and immediately know how to reach them. It sounds like Sophia inherited that gift," Victoria observed, remembering how naturally the little girl had offered comfort in the hotel lobby. "She did," Marcus agreed, pride evident in his voice. "Sometimes I think Jennifer sent me the perfect helper. Sophia has this way of knowing exactly what people need, even when they don't know it themselves." Victoria felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the desperate, frightened tears she'd cried in the hotel. These felt cleaner somehow, connected to gratitude rather than self-pity. "She certainly knew what I needed that night." "What did you need?" Sophia asked with the innocent directness that only children possessed. Victoria considered the question seriously. "I needed to remember that there are still kind people in the world. I needed to be reminded that money and success aren't the only things that matter. And I needed—" She paused, surprised by what she was about to admit. "I needed to not feel so alone." Sophia reached across the table and patted Victoria's hand with syrup-sticky fingers. "You're not alone now. You have us." The simple declaration hit Victoria with unexpected force. She looked at this little girl with her gap-toothed smile and her absolute certainty that friendship could be declared as easily as ordering pancakes, and felt something fundamental shift in her chest. "Yes," Victoria said quietly, covering Sophia's small hand with her own. "I guess I do." 2 weeks later, Victoria found herself in a place she never could have imagined, sitting on a park bench in Flushing Meadows, watching Sophia navigate the playground equipment with the fearless confidence of childhood, while Marcus stood nearby, ever vigilant but allowing his daughter the freedom to explore and climb and occasionally fall down and get back up again. The chemotherapy had started the previous Monday, and Victoria was discovering that the physical effects were even worse than Dr. Martinez had warned. The nausea came in waves that left her dizzy and disoriented. The fatigue was like carrying invisible weights attached to every limb, and her immune system was so compromised that she'd taken to wearing a surgical mask in public places. But somehow, spending time with Marcus and Sophia made the side effects feel bearable, gave her something to look forward to that had nothing to do with blood counts or tumor markers. "How are you really feeling?" Marcus asked, settling onto the bench beside her with 2 cups of coffee from the cart near the playground entrance. He'd learned to read the subtle signs of her discomfort. The way she pressed her lips together when nausea hit, the careful way she moved when her energy was low, the forced brightness in her voice when she was trying to pretend everything was fine. Victoria accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. "Like someone replaced my blood with sand and my bones with lead," she said honestly. "But also, lighter somehow? Does that make sense?" Marcus nodded. "Grief can feel like that too. Everything is heavier and lighter at the same time. Heavier because you're carrying something difficult. Lighter because you're not pretending anymore that everything is fine." The observation was so accurate that Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd found herself telling Marcus and Sophia things she'd never shared with anyone, about the loneliness of her childhood as the daughter of workaholic parents, about the fear that drove her relentless pursuit of success, about the emptiness she'd discovered at the center of everything she'd built. With them, pretending felt impossible and unnecessary. "I told my business partner about the cancer yesterday," Victoria said quietly, watching Sophia hang upside down from the monkey bars with complete trust that her body would hold her safely. "David Chen. We've worked together for 8 years, built the company from nothing. I thought he was my closest friend." Marcus waited, sensing there was more to the story. "He wanted to know how long I could keep working before the treatments made me unreliable," Victoria continued, her voice bitter with disappointment. His first concern wasn't my health or my fear or how he could support me. It was about minimizing the impact on our Q2 projections. I'm sorry, Marcus said simply. That must have hurt. It did. But it also clarified something important. I spent years building what I thought were relationships, but they were really just professional arrangements. Mutual benefit disguised as friendship. David cares about me as long as I'm useful to Sterling Technologies. The moment I become a liability, she shrugged, the gesture conveying years of disillusionment. Sophia appeared in front of them suddenly, breathing hard from her playground adventures, her cheeks flushed pink with exertion and joy. Victoria, did you see me on the big slide? I went down backwards and didn't get scared even once. I saw you, Victoria said, smiling despite the heaviness of their conversation. You were incredibly brave. I don't think I would have been that brave when I was your age. You're brave now, Sophia said matter-of-factly, climbing onto the bench between Victoria and her father. Fighting the sickness in your body is really brave, and being our friend even though we're different from your other friends, that's brave too. Victoria felt her breath catch. Out of the mouths of babes, she thought, marveling at how this child could cut straight to the heart of things that adults spent years learning to understand. Speaking of being different, Marcus said carefully, I should probably tell you something about why I really left the accounting job. Victoria turned to look at him, noting the tension that had crept into his shoulders. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to share. I want to, Marcus said, but it might change how you see me, and I guess I'm scared of losing this friendship before it really has a chance to grow. Sophia leaned against her father's arm, offering silent support in the way children do when they sense adult anxiety without fully understanding its source. I was fired, Marcus said quietly. Not for poor performance or attendance issues, but because I made a mistake. A big one. I was processing the books for one of our major clients, and I missed a discrepancy in their quarterly reports. It turned out they were embezzling funds, not huge amounts, but enough to matter. When the irregularities were discovered during an audit, my supervisors blamed me for not catching it sooner. Victoria listened without judgment, recognizing the shame in his voice, and remembering her own professional failures and the fear that had driven so many of her decisions. The truth is, I probably should have caught it, Marcus continued. I was distracted, grieving, trying to handle Jennifer's medical bills and take care of Sophia, and still do my job at the level they expected. Something had to give, and it was my attention to detail. But instead of acknowledging that I was struggling and needed support, I tried to handle everything alone. Pride, I guess. What happened to the client? Victoria asked. They were prosecuted and had to pay restitution, but my firm lost a major account and they needed someone to blame. Since I was the one who'd missed the warning signs, I became the scapegoat. They couldn't fire me immediately because of the circumstances, losing my wife, having a young child, but they made it clear that my future there was limited. Marcus paused, gathering courage for the hardest part of his story. The worst part wasn't losing the job. It was realizing that I'd been so focused on providing for Sophia financially that I'd almost missed providing for her emotionally. Those last months at the accounting firm, I was working late every night, stressed about performance reviews, bringing that anxiety home with me. Sophia needed her father to be present, not just financially stable. Victoria found herself thinking about her own relationship with work, about the nights she'd slept in her office, and the weekends she'd spent reviewing contracts instead of, what? She'd never had anyone who needed her presence the way Sophia needed Marcus. So you chose her over the career, Victoria said. I chose us over everything else, Marcus corrected, and it was the best decision I ever made. April arrived with the kind of surprising warmth that made New Yorkers shed their winter coats and remember why they loved their city despite everything else. Victoria sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's aging Honda Civic, watching the familiar landmarks of Manhattan give way to the suburban neighborhoods of Long Island. They were driving to visit Marcus's father, Joe Washington, and Victoria had been nervous about the meeting for days. The chemotherapy was taking its toll more aggressively now. Victoria had lost 15 pounds and most of her hair, which she'd covered with an expensive silk scarf that Sophia had declared prettier than a princess crown. Her energy came in unpredictable waves, and some days she could barely manage to get dressed, let alone maintain the facade of running Sterling Technologies. She'd finally taken a medical leave of absence, turning daily operations over to David Chen with a mixture of relief and terror. Tell me about your father again, Victoria said, adjusting the air conditioning vent away from her face. The smell of the car, a mixture of coffee, Sophia's apple juice boxes, and Marcus's aftershave, had become comforting to her, representing the real world she'd discovered existed outside her penthouse and corporate boardrooms. "Dad's been living in the same house in Levittown for 35 years, Marcus said, glancing in the rearview mirror at Sophia, who was absorbed in a picture book. "He worked construction until his heart attack, raised me alone after my mom died when I was 12. He's direct, sometimes brutally honest, but he has this way of seeing straight through to what matters." Sophia looked up from her book. "Grandpa Joe makes the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. And he taught me how to play checkers. He says I'm almost smart enough to beat him, but not quite yet." Victoria smiled at the little girl's confidence. Over the past month, Sophia had become a constant source of wonder and wisdom, her observations about life cutting through Victoria's carefully constructed defenses with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The child had an uncanny ability to ask exactly the right questions at exactly the right moments, as if Jennifer's spirit was indeed guiding her daughter's intuitive understanding of human nature. "Is he going to like me?" Victoria asked, and immediately felt foolish for the question. She was 30 years old, worth millions of dollars, and commanded rooms full of powerful executives. Yet she was worried about impressing a retired construction worker. "He's going to see right through any pretense to who you really are," Marcus said honestly. "Dad doesn't care about money or status or any of that. He cares about character, about how people treat others when they think no one important is watching." The observation made Victoria uncomfortable because she wasn't sure what Joe Washington would see when he looked at her. The woman who'd built sterling technologies had been ruthless when necessary, calculating in her business relationships, willing to sacrifice personal connections for professional advancement. But the woman sitting in this Honda Civic, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, holding hands with a 5-year-old who saw angels where others saw emptiness, who was she? They pulled into the driveway of a modest ranch house with a meticulously maintained front yard and flower boxes under every window. An older man emerged from the front door before they'd even gotten out of the car, tall and lean like Marcus, with silver hair and kind eyes that held the same steady presence Victoria had come to associate with his son. "There's my favorite granddaughter," Joe Washington called out, arms spread wide as Sophia ran to him with the abandon of unconditional love. Grandpa Joe, we brought Victoria to meet you," Sophia announced as Joe scooped her up in a hug that lifted her feet off the ground. "She's the one I told you about. The one who was sad at Daddy's work." Joe set Sophia down gently and turned his attention to Victoria, studying her with the frank assessment of someone who'd learned to read people accurately over 7 decades of life. She felt exposed under his gaze, as if he could see past her expensive clothes and careful makeup to the frightened woman underneath. "So you're the famous Victoria," Joe said, extending a calloused hand that enveloped hers completely. "Sophia's told me a lot about you. Says you're learning how to be a real friend." The directness of the statement caught Victoria off guard. "I'm trying to," she said honestly. "Your son and granddaughter are excellent teachers." Joe nodded approvingly. "Good answer. Come on inside. I made iced tea and Sophia's favorite cookies, though I suspect she'll want to show you her checkers skills before we eat anything." The interior of Joe's house was exactly what Victoria had expected. Comfortable furniture that had been chosen for durability rather than style. Walls covered with family photographs spanning decades, and the kind of lived-in warmth that money couldn't buy. Every surface told a story. Marcus's high school graduation photos, Sophia's artwork held to the refrigerator with magnets, Jennifer's teaching certificate framed and hung in a place of honor. "Sit," Joe said, gesturing to a well-worn recliner while he settled into its twin. "Marcus, take Sophia out back and show her how the tomatoes are coming along. Victoria and I need to have a conversation." Victoria felt her heart rate increase as Marcus and Sophia disappeared through the sliding glass door to the backyard. She'd faced hostile board members and aggressive competitors, but something about Joe Washington's steady attention made her feel like she was about to undergo the most important interview of her life. "My son tells me you're sick," Joe said without preamble. "Cancer." "Yes," Victoria said simply, recognizing that elaborate explanations would be wasted on this man. "That's rough. Lost my wife to breast cancer when Marcus was just a boy. Watched her fight for 2 years before she finally let go." Joe's eyes grew distant with memory. "Worst thing about cancer isn't the dying. It's the way it makes you question everything you thought you knew about living." Victoria felt tears threaten. "Yes, exactly that. Marcus also tells me you're rich. Successful businesswoman, built some kind of technology company from nothing." "That's right." Joe leaned forward in his chair, fixing her with a look that seemed to see straight into her soul. Here's what I want to know. Are you spending time with my family because you're lonely and scared and they're convenient? Or because you genuinely care about them as people? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to protest, to assure him that her feelings were genuine, but stopped when she realized he deserved a more thoughtful answer than reflexive defensiveness. Both, I think, she said finally. I was lonely and scared when Sophia found me crying in that hotel lobby, but caring about them, that happened so naturally I didn't even realize it was occurring until it was already done. They've become, she struggled for the right words, they've become the most important part of my life, more important than my company, more important than my reputation, more important than anything I thought mattered before I got sick. Joe studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good, because that little girl in my backyard has already lost one important woman in her life. She doesn't need another one disappearing when things get complicated. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria said with quiet intensity. Whatever time I have left, I want to spend it with people who see me as more than just a business opportunity. Your family has given me that gift. Time, Joe repeated thoughtfully. Funny thing about time, most people think they need more of it, but what they really need is to use what they have better. Cancer teaches you that lesson whether you want to learn it or not. Through the sliding glass door, Victoria could see Marcus and Sophia examining tomato plants, their heads bent together in serious consultation about something that was clearly very important to a 5-year-old's understanding of gardening. They're good people, Joe said, following her gaze. Marcus gave up a lot to be the father Sophia needed after Jennifer died. Not many men would have made that choice. He told me about the accounting job. Did he tell you about the sacrifices? Joe asked. The nights he ate peanut butter sandwiches so Sophia could have real meals? The way he sold Jennifer's engagement ring to pay for her preschool tuition? The job interviews he turned down because they would have required travel? Victoria felt her chest tighten. Marcus had never mentioned these details, had never presented himself as a martyr or asked for sympathy. No, he didn't tell me any of that, because that's not who he is. Marcus doesn't keep score of his sacrifices. He just makes them and moves forward. But I want you to understand what you're dealing with here. This isn't a man who makes commitments lightly, and it's not a family that opens their hearts casually. If you're going to be part of their lives, you need to be all in. The weight of Joe's words settled over Victoria like a blanket, warm and heavy and slightly overwhelming. She thought about the relationships she'd maintained throughout her adult life, careful, calculated, always with an exit strategy. But sitting in this living room, looking at pictures of a family who'd learned to hold tightly to what mattered, she realized that some commitments were meant to be permanent. I understand, Victoria said quietly, and I'm all in. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in late May, jolting Victoria from the restless sleep that had become her new normal. Marcus's name appeared on her phone screen, and she answered immediately, her heart racing with the kind of dread that only comes with middle-of-the-night phone calls. Victoria, I'm sorry to wake you, but I need help. Marcus's voice was tight with controlled panic. Sophia's running a high fever, 104 degrees, and she's been vomiting for the past hour. I'm at Queen's General Emergency Room, but they're backed up and we've been waiting for 2 hours. She's asking for you. Victoria was already pulling on clothes before Marcus finished speaking. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Have you been able to speak with a doctor yet? They said it could be another hour before anyone can see her properly. The triage nurse thinks it might be food poisoning or a stomach virus, but with her fever this high, Marcus's voice broke slightly. I keep thinking about all the times Jennifer brought sick kids to the hospital when she was teaching. She always said the waiting was the worst part. Keep her hydrated if you can and try to stay calm, Victoria said, grabbing her keys and heading for the elevator. Children pick up on parental anxiety, and Sophia needs you to be steady right now. I'm on my way. The drive to Queen's General felt endless despite the empty roads. Victoria found herself praying to a God she hadn't spoken to since childhood, making bargains and promises with the desperation of someone who'd already lost too much and couldn't bear to lose more. Sophia had become the bright center of her new world, the child who'd taught her what unconditional love looked like, and the thought of anything serious being wrong felt like facing a second cancer diagnosis. She found them in the emergency room waiting area, Marcus pacing anxiously while Sophia lay curled up on his lap, pale and listless in a way that made Victoria's heart clench. The little girl's normally bright eyes were glassy with fever, and she barely lifted her head when Victoria approached. Hey, sweetheart, Victoria said softly. kneeling beside their chairs and stroking Sophia's damp hair. "I hear you're not feeling very good." "Victoria," Sophia whispered, reaching out with a trembling hand. "My tummy hurts really bad and everything feels too hot and too cold at the same time." "I know, baby. That's what happens when your body is fighting off germs," Victoria said, taking Sophia's small hand in both of hers. "But you know what? You're in exactly the right place to get better. The doctors here are going to figure out what's making you sick and fix it." Marcus watched the interaction with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, a recognition that Victoria's presence was as much for his benefit as for Sophia's. Over the past 3 months, she'd become integral to their small family unit, showing up for school plays and playground visits and ordinary Tuesday evenings, with the consistency of someone who'd chosen them deliberately and permanently. "How long has she been like this?" Victoria asked quietly. "It started around 10 p.m. with the vomiting," Marcus said, settling back into his chair with Sophia still curled against his chest. "The fever spiked about an hour later. I gave her children's Tylenol, but it doesn't seem to be helping much." Victoria studied Sophia's flushed face and made a decision that would have been unthinkable 4 months ago. "Wait here. I'll be right back." She walked directly to the reception desk where a harried-looking nurse was fielding complaints from other waiting families. "Excuse me. I need to speak with someone about Sophia Washington. She's 5 years old, running a 104-degree fever, and has been waiting over 2 hours to see a doctor." "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but we're triaging based on severity of symptoms," and Victoria pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd hoped never to use for personal reasons. "Dr. Martinez? It's Victoria Sterling. I know it's late, but I need a favor. I'm at Queens General with friends of mine. A 5-year-old with a high fever who's been waiting hours for medical attention. Is there anyone you know here who could expedite things?" The conversation was brief but effective. Within 15 minutes, a pediatric resident named Dr. Kim was examining Sophia in a proper treatment room, taking her temperature and asking careful questions about her symptoms while Marcus held her hand, and Victoria stood nearby, feeling helpless but grateful to be included. "The good news is that this appears to be a straightforward stomach virus," Dr. Kim announced after completing his examination. "Her lungs are clear, her throat looks fine, and the fever is responding to the IV fluids we've given her. These bugs are going around the schools right now, highly contagious but not dangerous in healthy children." Marcus sagged with relief. "So she's going to be okay?" "She's going to be fine," Dr. Kim confirmed. "Keep her hydrated, let her rest, and the fever should break within 24 to 48 hours. Bring her back if she shows any signs of dehydration or if the fever goes above 105, but I expect she'll be back to her normal self by the weekend." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Sophia fell asleep in Marcus's arms, her fever finally beginning to break. Victoria walked beside them to the parking garage, struck by how natural it felt to be part of this crisis, how right it seemed to be the person Marcus called when he needed help. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly as they reached his car. "For coming, for making the call, for being here. I know you have your own health issues to worry about and—" "Don't," Victoria interrupted gently. "Don't thank me for showing up for people I love. That's not something that deserves gratitude. It's just what family does." The word hung between them in the humid night air, full of weight and promise and the kind of commitment that couldn't be taken back once spoken. "Family," Marcus repeated softly, testing the word. "Family," Victoria confirmed, and realized she'd never meant anything more completely in her entire life. As Marcus drove away with Sophia sleeping peacefully in her car seat, Victoria sat in her own car for a long time, thinking about the phone call she'd made and the favors she'd called in without hesitation. For 30 years, she'd built networks and accumulated influence for the advancement of Sterling Technologies. Tonight, for the first time, she'd used that power for something infinitely more important. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez. "Hope your friend's daughter is feeling better. Also, wanted to let you know your latest scans came back. Some encouraging signs. We should talk soon." Victoria read the message twice, surprised to realize that her own prognosis felt secondary to Sophia's recovery. 6 months ago, news about her cancer would have dominated every thought and emotion. Now it was just one factor among many in a life that had become beautifully complicated, complex, and worth fighting for. She drove home through the empty streets of Queens and Manhattan, past the hotel where this all began, thinking about the strange mathematics of love and how it multiplied rather than divided when shared with the right people. 6 months later, Victoria Sterling stood in the backyard of Joe Washington's house, watching Sophia chase fireflies in the gathering dusk of a perfect July evening. The little girl's laughter carried across the yard like music, punctuated by her excited announcements each time she managed to cup one of the glowing insects in her small hands, before carefully releasing it back into the summer air. "Look, Victoria! Look how many there are!" Sophia called out, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched as dozens of fireflies blinked around her like living stars. "Grandpa Joe says they're celebrating something special tonight." Victoria smiled, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the silk scarf that covered her slowly growing hair. The latest scan results had been beyond anything Dr. Martinez had dared to hope for. The tumors had shrunk dramatically, her cancer markers were at the lowest levels since diagnosis, and the word remission had been spoken for the first time in 8 months. It wasn't a cure, and it wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope made tangible, printed on medical reports and confirmed by second opinions. "What do you think they're celebrating?" Victoria asked, settling onto the porch steps beside Marcus, who was nursing a beer and watching his daughter with the contentment of a man who'd learned to treasure ordinary moments. "Maybe they're celebrating new friends," Sophia suggested, catching another firefly and examining it closely before letting it go. "Or maybe they're celebrating people who were sad but learned how to be happy again," Marcus chuckled, shaking his head at his daughter's insight. "Or maybe they're just celebrating summer and the fact that it's beautiful outside and we're all together." Victoria leaned back against the porch railing, letting the warmth of the evening and the sound of Sophia's joy wash over her. The past 6 months had transformed her life in ways she was still learning to understand. Sterling Technologies was thriving under David Chen's leadership, though Victoria had made it clear she would never again prioritize the company over the relationships that actually mattered. She'd sold her penthouse and bought a smaller apartment in Queens, 20 minutes from Marcus and Sophia's place, close enough to be part of their daily lives but far enough to maintain healthy boundaries. "I have something to tell you both," Victoria said, her voice carrying a mixture of nervousness and excitement that made Marcus look at her with sharp attention. "I got some news today." Sophia stopped chasing fireflies and ran over to them, sensing the importance of whatever announcement was coming. She climbed onto the porch steps between Victoria and her father, looking up at Victoria with expectant eyes. "Remember how we talked about the medicine helping to fight the sickness in my body?" Victoria began, choosing her words carefully for Sophia's understanding while Marcus watched her face intently. "Well, the doctors did some new tests and they found out that the medicine is working even better than they hoped it would." "Does that mean you're getting better?" Sophia asked, her voice filled with the kind of hope that children invest in outcomes they believe adults can control through sheer determination. "It means I'm getting much better," Victoria confirmed, feeling tears of gratitude threaten as she spoke the words aloud. "The doctors think that with continued treatment, I have a very good chance of being healthy for a very long time. Maybe even," she paused, still afraid to say it, "maybe even a normal lifespan." Marcus set down his beer and turned to face her fully, his eyes bright with emotion. "Victoria, that's incredible. When did you find out?" "This afternoon. Dr. Martinez called with the results, and I asked him 3 times to repeat what he was telling me because I couldn't believe it was real." Victoria wiped at her eyes, laughing through her tears. "I wanted to call you immediately, but I also wanted to tell you in person, together, because—" She looked at Sophia, then at Marcus. "Because you're the people who matter most to me. You're the people I want to share good news with." Sophia launched herself into Victoria's arms with the enthusiastic physicality of a child who'd never learned to moderate her affection. "I knew it," she announced confidently. "I knew the doctors would figure out how to fix you. Mommy told me in a dream that everything was going to be okay." Victoria held Sophia tightly, breathing in the scent of summer and childhood and infinite possibility. Over the little girl's shoulder, she met Marcus's eyes and saw her own overwhelming gratitude reflected back at her. "There's something else," Victoria said when Sophia finally pulled back to look at her. "Something I've been thinking about for weeks, and this news today made me realize I don't want to wait any longer to ask." Marcus raised an eyebrow, curious about what other surprises Victoria might have in store. "I've been wondering," Victoria continued, her heart racing with nervousness, "how you would both feel about me being a more official part of this family. Not in any way that changes what you have together, but in a way that makes it clear that I'm committed to being here for the long term, for school plays and birthday parties and ordinary Tuesday nights and whatever else comes." Sophia clapped her hands together with delight. "Like being my bonus mom? The way some kids have step-parents, but you'd be like..." An extra parent who chose us? The description was so perfectly accurate, so beautifully simple in the way that only children could make complicated adult emotions, that Victoria felt her breath catch with wonder. Exactly like that, sweetheart. If that's something you and your daddy would want. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying Victoria's face in the growing darkness, lit by the soft glow of Joe's porch light and the occasional flash of fireflies. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Jennifer used to say that family isn't just about the people you're born to. It's about the people who show up for you when showing up is difficult, he said softly. You've shown up for us in ways I never expected, ways that go far beyond friendship or obligation. Sophia loves you. I love you. And Dad thinks you hung the moon. If you want to be part of this family officially, then we want that too. Victoria felt a completeness she'd never experienced before, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with achievement or accumulation, and everything to do with choice and commitment and the daily decision to love people well. Then it's settled, she said, pulling both Marcus and Sophia into a hug that felt like coming home. We're family. Joe appeared in the doorway behind them, having clearly been eavesdropping on their conversation with the shameless curiosity of a grandfather who cared deeply about his family's happiness. About time, he said gruffly, though his eyes were bright with approval. I was wondering when you two would figure out what Sophia and I already knew months ago. As the evening deepened and the fireflies continued their ancient dance, Victoria Sterling, successful businesswoman, cancer survivor, and newly minted bonus mom, sat on Joe Washington's porch steps surrounded by the people who'd taught her that the only wealth that really mattered was the wealth of connections built with intention, maintained with care, and deepened through the simple act of showing up for each other day after day, for as long as life allowed. The little girl who'd wiped her tears in a hotel lobby 8 months ago had given her everything she'd never known she needed: a family, a purpose, and the understanding that sometimes the most important journeys begin not with a destination in mind, but with a 5-year-old's fearless belief that broken things can always be healed with enough love and patience and the willingness to try. In the distance, the city hummed with its eternal rhythm of ambition and achievement, but here in this backyard in Levittown, surrounded by fireflies and laughter and the quiet contentment of people who'd chosen each other deliberately and permanently, Victoria finally understood what her mother had tried to tell her all those years ago. The best things in life couldn't be bought or built or achieved. They could only be received with gratitude and protected with fierce devotion, and shared with the kind of generous love that multiplied rather than diminished when given freely. And as Sophia fell asleep in her lap while Marcus and Joe discussed tomorrow's plans for building a new swing set, Victoria Sterling realized that she'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. Home wasn't a place you owned, but a collection of people who saw you clearly, loved you anyway, and showed up faithfully, creating a safe harbor in the storm of an uncertain world. The fireflies continued their ancient celebration around them, and Victoria smiled, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them surrounded by the family she'd chosen, and who had chosen her in return.